All right, friends, so we are going to dig into what we are practicing today, which is main topic. And we're going to look at the main topic of two different pages in A River of Words. So before we start off, you guys see that we have a chart here to help us with main topic. First, I want you just to listen while I read this page out loud and think about what is this page mostly about. But when Mr. Abbott read poetry to Willie's English class, Willie did not feel hurried. The gentle sounds and shifting rhythms of the poems were like the music of the river. As the teacher read each line, Willie closed his eyes and let them make pictures in his mind. So if we think back to the page before this, Willie had just started high school. He's older now, he's in high school, and he feels hurried. We see him running into school to get to class on time after track practice. But now all of a sudden in his English class, in his reading class, Willie hears his teacher reading poems. That's what we see here in the illustration. And here we see Willie with his eyes closed, imagining the pictures that he hears with the words in his mind. And does Willie still feel hurried? No, Willie is relaxed. And I know that if I look at the text. As the teacher read each line, Willie closed his eyes and let them make pictures in his mind. So that's what he was doing that we read in the last sentence. But if we look back to the first sentence, when Mr. Abbott read poetry to Willie's English class, Willie did not feel hurried. So is this a main topic or a detail that Willie did not feel hurried? He doesn't feel hurried anymore, so it must be the main topic. Nah, we want to think about for the main topic, what's the whole page mostly about? So Willie doesn't feel hurried, but why? What is making him not feel hurried? What is this whole page mostly about? If we look at our chart, we see that the main topic is that Willie enjoys listening to poems in English class. That tells me what this whole page is about. All of these sentences tell us that Willie enjoys listening to poems in his English class. And we know that he enjoys them because he's hurried all the time, but all of a sudden when he listens to those poems, he feels calm. He's able to think about the river. So that's why we have that here as our first supporting detail. That's our first clue that Willie enjoys listening to poems, is that Willie doesn't feel hurried when he listens to his teacher reading poems. Let's look at another example, another supporting detail. Another supporting detail we have here in our chart. If we read this page again, but when Mr. Abbott read poetry to Willie's English class, Willie did not feel hurried. We already said that Willie not feeling hurried was a supporting detail. So we're looking for another supporting detail that tells us that Willie enjoys listening to poems in English class. The gentle sounds and shifting rhythms of the poems were like the music of the river. So we want to think about the music of the river. We know that the river is super important because it's part of our title, A River of Words. And he's not listening to a real river anymore. He's at school. He's not exploring outside. But when he listens to the poems, they remind him of when he used to lay by the river and listen to the music that he would hear from the water. The poems are like a river of words because they remind Willie of the same thing. They make him feel relaxed. They make him feel inspired. They both sound like music to him. So that is a clue, another supporting detail, that he enjoys the poems, that supports our main topic. If he liked, or we know that he likes the river, so if the poems remind him of the river, this is again showing the main topic. This is showing that Willie likes listening to poems. So if I use my handy dandy highlighter, I want to highlight that supporting detail. The poems were like the music of the river. And that's what we see here in our second detail on this green circle. Listening to the poems remind Willie, that should be a W, remind Willie of the sounds from the river. We know that from looking at the text says the poems were like the music of the river. And if we look back to our main topic, that he enjoys listening to the poems, that tells us how. That supports the main topic by explaining how or why he likes listening to those poems. Let's look at one more supporting detail and read our page again. So again, we know right before we read this page, the main topic is what? That's right. The main topic is that Willie enjoys listening to the poems in each class. While I read the page this time, see if you can find your own supporting detail that we haven't discussed yet. But when Mr. Abbott read poetry to Willie's English class, Willie did not feel hurried. The gentle sounds and shifting rhythms of the poems were like the music of the river. As the teacher read each line, Willie closed his eyes and let them make pictures in his mind. So another detail that we have in the text that we haven't discussed yet is how Willie would make pictures in his mind with the words. As the teacher read each line, Willie closed his eyes and let them make pictures in his mind. That's what we see here in the illustration. The teacher is reading, and we see the words coming out of his mouth from the poem, and here's Willie closing his eyes, visualizing, just like we do when we annotate. Wait, visualizing is when you take words and make pictures in your mind. And if we look at the illustration, Willie is smiling while he does that. So this is another supporting detail, a detail that shows the main topic. If Willie is smiling and making pictures in his mind with the words, this shows that he enjoys listening to the poems. And that is why we have used this last detail to, in our chart, Willie visualizes by closing his eyes and letting the words make pictures in his mind. That's the last detail. And we know that it's a detail because it's not what the page is about. It's one part of the page. But the whole page is about how he enjoys listening to the poems. A detail that supports that is how Willie visualizes by closing his eyes. So now let's look at our chart all together now. After we've had, So now we have this right here. If we look at our chart all together, we have finished finding the table and all the legs that hold it up. We know that the big part of the table is Willie enjoys listening to poems in English class. We know that because he doesn't feel hurried, listening to the poems reminds him of the river, and he's able to visualize. He's able to make pictures in his mind from the words. All of these are details that bring us back to our main topic, that bring us back to what the page is mostly about, which is how Willie enjoys listening to poems in his class. Let's look at a new page and see if we can find a main topic and new supporting details.